I'm Micah Smith, and I'm a developer evangelist here at Automation Anywhere. And in this session for Imagine, we're going to be looking at accelerating AP automation with IQBot. And I'm really excited to talk about IQBot's auto extraction capabilities. So let's go ahead and get started. So for our agenda, we're going to talk about first, what is IQBot? Not everyone who's attending this session may have a background in IQBot, so we're going to talk about just real quick what IQBot actually is. We're then going to talk about what IQBot auto extraction is and the extraction package that you can download and use. And then we'll talk about how it works with Automation 360 and how you can combine the two. And then finally, we'll get into a demo and we'll show exactly how this can be set up, how you set up a learning instance that can leverage this auto extraction capability, and then we'll use it in a real bot so that we can see how it can work end to end when we're doing the extraction and we're entering that invoice data into another system. Sound good? All right. So first off, what is IQBot? IQBot is an intelligent document processing solution that allows us to leverage AI technologies like computer vision, natural language processing or NLP, fuzzy logic, and machine learning. And it allows us to automatically classify and extract while validating our information from those different business documents. So that could be invoices, that could be mortgage documents, that could be billing statements, that could be contracts, but it allows us to extract that data that we're looking for. Those capabilities can then be combined with Automation 360 to enable end-to-end business process automation. So we can take in those forms, we can extract the data that we need, and then we can go on with the rest of our RPA flow, which might be entering that data into different systems of record or taking action based on the results that we've extracted. Now, what specifically is the IQBot auto extraction? So auto extraction is a new package that's available from Automation Anywhere that leverages a pre-trained AI model for out-of-box invoice processing. So given how much AI technology has moved in recent years, Automation Anywhere is able to deliver a pre-trained model that can extract invoice data with no requirement for manual training up front. And straight out of box, the accuracy is high, setup time is minimal, and you can leverage this auto extraction capability to read data from invoices. Let's take a look at the benefits of this. So our first benefit is reduced time to ROI. With this pre-trained model, the time needed to train and validate a learning instance is significantly reduced. So I can be recognizing that return on investment much more quickly. Second, improved accuracy right out of box. So because this is a pre-trained model, it's been trained on thousands and thousands of invoices already, it's going to be able to automatically recognize a lot of those common invoice fields and automatically do that extraction for me. Next, it can work alongside the customer trained models for high volume and unique invoice types. So this can work with learning instances that you already have set up. This can also work with brand new learning instances that you might create, where you need at least one group that's defined within that learning instance, and then you can use this auto extraction capability. If the phrases learning instance and group are a little bit new to you, we're going to get into that here in a minute when we do our demo, so I'll make sure to explain all of those concepts. And finally, it's extremely scalable, and I think this is probably the number one benefit that we have here, is that this can run locally on the bot runner. So because this is a new package, this allows you to run this directly on the bot runner, and that means that you can really scale your intelligent document processing capabilities. So if you have 50 bot runners, technically you could be running 50 invoice extractions all side by side, all simultaneously. And so that allows you to scale to a much greater degree with this local package. So let's take a look at how this works in Automation 360. So we start off with our IQBot extraction, and that's our custom package. Now, with that package, it leverages both the pre-trained invoices model as well as any custom trained model or groups defined in learning instance. So when we're talking about the pre-trained invoices model, no special handling is needed, right? I don't really have to do anything to set it up, and I'll show you that. It's going to work automatically when I'm using that IQBot extraction package. It's also trained to work on all common invoice field types. So again, there's not a whole lot of setup that I have to do for this. It's going to look to our default group type to determine the rules for what data has to be extracted and what are our rules for stuff that's mandatory versus optional. And we'll look at that here in a little bit. but it's going to work out of box with those common field types. It can also work alongside my customer trained models or my customer trained groups. And those groups might be for my unique invoices, high volume invoices, or validation invoices. So as I'm using this and as I see certain invoices may need validation, those might be a clue to me that that's a good opportunity to set up a new group within my learning instance to make sure that I'm automating as much of these forms as possible. But again, the combination of the two should ultimately lead to improved extraction results. And you should see that right away, right out of box. As a result of my extraction, just like with the regular IQbot processing, I can then go directly to validation for those invoices that did not meet my confidence thresholds or did not have all of their fields extracted for any reason. And then I also have my success queue where all of those documents will arrive, and then I can do my next step in processing, which might be entering data into another application, or it might be another bot that gets triggered to ultimately make decisions on that data and determine where that data needs to go. So with that said, let's take a look at a demo here, and we're going to set up this auto extraction capability and test it out and see how it can work within a process. So I'm in my control room now, and I'm going to click on this Explore IQbot. And this is going to open up the IQbot interface. And obviously in my environment, I've got a lot of learning instances that have been set up. Ignore that for right now. We're going to create a brand new one here. So on the Learning Instances tab here, I'm going to click on this New Instance. And I'm going to give my instance a name. I'll call this one Imagine 2021 Invoices. And then I would select a document type. So when I set up my learning instance, what really drives the logic behind it is going to be my document type. And here I'm saying, hey, this learning instance is going to be set up to handle invoices. And based on that document type, we can see that I've got a bunch of different fields that I can define of what I'm really looking to extract from this document type, right? So from all of the documents that get sent to this learning instance, what are the details or what are the data that I need out of that? So to set up my learning instance, I do have to have at least one group defined. And I would do that by browsing out and grabbing at least one image to define that group. So what I'm going to do is I have a folder that's been set up here. I've got just 6 invoices in here. I'm going to grab this invoice3.tif and hit open. And then I'm going to go and look at the fields that I actually want to extract from my invoices. And again, this is going to apply to this group, but the rules that we establish here will also apply to our auto extraction capabilities as well. So I'll show you how that works. I want to grab the invoice date, the invoice number, and the invoice total. Again, these are common field types. I'm also going to grab the purchase order number. But again, depending on the invoices you're dealing with and your actual use case, you may or may not want more or less of these different fields. At the top here, these are the fields that are going to show up usually like once per form. At the bottom, we've got our common table or repeated section fields. And this is the stuff that's going to show up in a table for my invoice. And it might be, hey, you purchased the following 5 things, and this is the quantity, and this is the description, and this is the name, and this is the amount, stuff like that. So I'm going to go down here. Right now it's got item description, item total, and quantity. I'm also going to grab item name here. And those all look good. For the optical character recognition, or OCR, I'm going to leave that as Abby. And for auto checkbox detection, I'm going to leave that off because we're really not dealing with that for this example. And I will hit create learning instance, or create instance and analyze, I'm sorry, is what the actual button says. So at this point, it's going to upload that document, or you could have selected multiple documents, that would be fine too. I selected just a single document because we just need to create a single group. But the best guidance or the best principle I would say here is if you have a bunch of invoices, grab one that is like your most common invoice and take a couple variations of it and upload that, because that will be a good one to create a group for, because that's the one you really want to make sure you automate, the highest volume, the most representative of your set. So this is the invoice that I uploaded here, and we can see straight out of box that IQbot does an excellent job of being able to find a lot of this data. So it's already recognized the invoice date label. It's also recognized the value paired with that. And we can see as we click through these that it's finding the same for my invoice total, my invoice number. I'm going to click on purchase order. Now, personally, I know that not all of my invoices are going to have a purchase order. So what I'm going to do is make that an optional field. And that's just because I may not have purchase orders that have been defined for every single invoice, and I don't want to disqualify or send an invoice to validation just because it didn't have a purchase order. Cool. So with that said, I'm going to click on this table section, and this is where I can set up the table settings. And I can choose what is the repeating element that we should be looking out for. I'm going to leave this as item total, which says, hey, each of these is considered a valid row as long as we have a value in this column. And item total would be this one down here. So, sometimes you can have descriptions that go across multiple lines, or even item names that could go across multiple lines. So here you want to pick an item that's only going to show up once per row. Might be quantity would be a good one, item amount or item total would be a good one as well. I can also choose an end of table indicator. So I'm just going to hit this subtotal here, and I will leave that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is for my item name. It was not able to find that one automatically, and that's because item name doesn't show up on this particular form. But I'm going to click this as the column header, which is my item number, and I'm going to use that as the item name for this one. Now, this is all just kind of standard IQbot, setting this up, setting up a group. So I went through and did that for this one particular type. Now I'm going to hit save and go to next group. And it's going to say, hey, you're about to save this current training. What do you want to do? Do you want to save and send this group to production? Or do you just want to save it and maybe you're going to come back and work on it later? So I'm going to hit save and send to production. And it's going to say, hey, there's nothing left to train for this particular group. Great. So now I've got my learning instance set up and it has one group. If I had lots of different invoice types that I wanted to manually train, I could do that. I would just create additional groups here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit edit on this, because the last thing we need to do for this auto extraction to work is we want to set up what our default validation group should be. And that's going to be group 30. And that's where I'm saying, hey, what are the default rules that should be followed for the kind of data that we need to extract, right? For our example, like if it doesn't have a item description, I'm not going to count that as a valid row. So I want to make sure that that's going to fail my validation rules. So we want to make sure that the rules that we just set up there with the type of fields and what's required and what's not, those are the rules that are going to apply to my auto extraction. So that's why I select group 30 here, which was the name of the group that we just created. Cool. So with that, I'm going to hit save, and then I can set this to production. So I've set my group already to production, but without the learning instance also set to production, that's not really available. So now I'm going to set the learning instance itself to production. Now, with that learning instance itself set to production, this becomes a learning instance that I can now reference in the extraction package back on my bot building interface. So let's jump over to that so we can see how that works. So back here, I'm going to go to the My Bots directory. I'm going to go to my Imagine 2021 directory and then IQbot invoices. I'm just going to create one real quick, and I'll call this Imagine 2021 demo and hit create and edit. You don't have to put yours in the same folder structure I did. That's really just for my own organizational purposes. I'm a reformed monster where I used to just save everything in the root of the bots directory, and it became incredibly difficult to manage. So I'm trying to be better about keeping those in appropriate directories. So the package we're going to use here is called IQbot Extraction. Now, I want to point out that this is not going to be showing up in your default install. This is actually an extra package that's available. If you have IQbot, it's automatically available to you. You just need to go to the A-People download section, and you can download and install this package. So you'll want to go there and grab that. So I'm going to grab that over here. And it's going to ask for a couple things on my IQbot extraction details. So first, I need to choose a learning instance. And this is the one we just created. And it obviously has that one group defined that we had set up. And then I choose an input and output folder path. So again, because this is all running locally, this allows me to basically determine, hey, where are those files that I need to process? So if this was a real bot, maybe I'd go and download those files off of an email, off of a shared server someplace. I would grab all those files. I would define the input directory, which is where those files would live. And then I would define the output directory, which is where I want to save out the result of our extraction. And that would be the CSV files that get created for my successes. So I'm going to hit browse here, and I'm going to go out to that same directory we were just looking at. It was in ctemp Imagine 2021, IQbot invoice processing and input. And I'm going to select that and hit select folder. Let me make sure that folder actually has the invoices in it. I didn't see. Yeah, okay, that's correct. And then I'm going to copy that same path and put it down here and just change that from input to output, because that's where I want my output files to go. And I think they both end in a backslash. That's correct. And then the last thing I have is send documents to IQbot validator for validation. And so what that means is, if I'm going to process, here we have 6 total documents. If I'm going to process 6 documents and let's say 1 or 2 of them are not able to meet my confidence thresholds and the rules that I had set up for my learning instance for extraction, then what do I want to do with those? And if I send those to the IQbot validator for validation, we'll see in the interface here that I'll actually be able to, as an end user, go through and validate to basically give the corrected data to this invoice to say, hey, we extracted some extra stuff, or we tried to extract the purchase order number and we couldn't find it, or we tried to extract the invoice total and we couldn't find it. So I'd be able to basically perfect the results of that extraction and then also make that available for processing later on. So with both of those set up, I'm going to hit save and I'll hit run. Now, while this is kicking off, I do want to explain one thing. The IQbot extraction package, remember, that is going to run local on our bot runner. And the first time that you run this, what's happening is as the control room sends out a task to a bot runner, which is, again, my local machine in this case, it's going to send all required packages needed for processing to that bot runner. And that's a normal process. That's how it works for every single bot. This isn't unique to IQbot extraction. But when you do it for IQbot extraction, the IQbot extraction package is larger than a standard package. So when that process starts and it starts to send that task to my local client, validate that any needed packages are installed before it can start running, that first time you run it might be a little bit slower. So that's just a heads up. It's a larger package than a typical package. So when that first run happens, it's going to take a little bit longer, but subsequent runs, that download won't have to happen, and so you should be good. In the testing that I've done, this typically, again, it's going to be fully dependent on your machine specs, but on my machine, which is just a regular like ThinkPad laptop, and I've always got extra stuff running on it because I'm doing 50 things at once, it's taking about 45 seconds per image, but obviously your results will vary based on the machine specs where you're actually running this. So if you're running this on a server or you're running this on some souped up machine, you'd probably expect to see slightly better results in this. But for me, it's been taking about 45 seconds. So we'll let that run here and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so mine just completed, and let's hit the close button here. And we will go and look at our output directory. So I'm going to go to IQbot invoice processing. I'll look at output. I've got 3 folders. I have a retrain, a success, and a validate. So that means at least one of my invoices was not successful. So let's look at the success. Here we see that of the 6 that I uploaded, what is that? 1, 2, so 5 were successful. And then 1 is invalidate, meaning that we were not able to successfully read all of its fields, or that it missed one of our rules that we had set up for our specific group that was defined as a default group. So if we look at the success, what this is a CSV which contains all of the details of our invoice. This might have popped up on my other screen. Here we go. So we've got the invoice date, we've got the invoice number, invoice total, the purchase order number, and then I've got my my tabular data, right? So these fields right here where the data or the data elements that we said were just showing up per form, these are the data elements that are showing up per row in a table. So I've got my item name plus my whatever item description. All right, so I'm going to close this out. And one other thing I want to bring up here, when we looked at, we have basically 5 that are output. We only did training on that one group, right? We only custom trained a single group. But really, of the invoices that were in that folder, they represented invoices that did not match the exact group that we had, right? That exact classification. And so that's how we know that the extraction component or the auto extraction actually worked, because the invoice 1 and 3 were the same, but invoice 7 was different, invoice IA was different, and INV 05824, they were of different types. And so auto extraction was able to get all of those for us without us having to actually do any kind of manual training or anything like that. Now, before we move on to our next step, I want to show you what that validation looks like. So if I come here to my dashboard and I find my 2021 invoices right here, this is my learning instance. And actually, I'm going to go back to this learning instance tab right here. So we can see on this right here, it says launch validator, right? So because this one has a red exclamation point logo instead of a green check mark, that means that there are some invoices that are eligible for validation. So I'm going to click on this launch validator. And at this point, it's going to load up the image for my invoice. And notice this invoice is a little bit weird. It's got kind of a weird table. The header isn't exactly like the other ones. So it's just a little bit different of a setup. So I could see why this one missed. Now, what we see is that it was able to grab the invoice date, okay. It was able to grab the invoice number. The invoice total was correct, even though it says 0, which just happened to be a $0 invoice. Purchase order doesn't show up. If I go here and look, it actually doesn't have a purchase order defined, and that's fine because we left that as an optional field. Here is where it got a little bit screwy, right? It was trying to read all of these repeating data elements, and because item total was what we had set as our repeating element, it actually kept going and kept thinking that these other rows were also included. So what I'm going to do is hit delete here, and obviously this could be fixed longer term by me going and changing the repeating element that was used for the table definition, or it may mean that I need to create a custom group just for the Rainbow tables incorporated. So 2 different options there. Again, depending on why it failed or why it's in validation, would kind of lead me to either make one of those 2 changes in the future. So I'm going to hit save current document and hit save. Yes, I'm done. Now at this point, we have all of our invoices have been extracted successfully. So I'm going to hit close here, and I just want to demo this to you. This is for invoice submission. So this is just a dummy bot that I've set up just to demo kind of what you could do once you've already got your invoices read. And so this is a kind of a short process here where we're going to download the invoice details. We're going to launch an application called FastBooks, which is just kind of like a dummy application for entering invoice data. We're going to loop through all of our invoices and enter all of that data into FastBooks. And then we'll do a cleanup, which involves us getting rid of some of the stuff that we've saved locally on our machine. So the only thing I'm going to need to do here is download this IQBot invoice details. I'm just going to change this one to Imagine 2021 invoices and hit save. Now what this is going to do is it's going to save my invoices from the IQBot server to a local folder that I have set up for the bot runner. And that's going to be, it hasn't created it yet, but it's going to be in this output directory. It's going to be in the output directory, and it's going to be called from server. And so it's going to save all of the success CSVs there. Now that would include all 5 that we had successfully processed the first time. It would also include now that one that has been validated. So all 6 should be downloaded. So let's go ahead and run this and see how it works. And again, this is really just an example so that you can see how, hey, after I've got this IQBot stuff set up, after I've used that extraction package, what can I do with these invoices from there? And it's really thinking about what you need to do with your invoices and how you can take that further, whether that's validating information on them, whether that is entering data into a form like this, but lots of capabilities when you're entering and needing to enter invoice data. So as you can see, mine's going through and entering all of the invoice data into this form. It's also selecting the file for upload and then submitting that invoice. And it's going to go through and do this for all 6 of the invoices that we have. Notice this is the one that didn't have the purchase order number, so it left that one blank. It's adding each row to this. So as it goes through, we'll see that some of these invoices have more data than others. But you can see that my bot is now able to automate the full end-to-end data entry for this. So when we think about this as a full end-to-end business process, it might start with getting invoices from an email inbox, downloading them, then processing them through extraction, and it might end with entering that invoice data and uploading the invoice itself to a system of record. Obviously, this is just a kind of fake application that we can use for testing, but this is just to get you thinking about how you could see your invoices going end to end. If this is an area of interest, we'll probably do an AA Illustrates, just like another instructional video series on how to actually automate entering data into this kind of website, because this is, again, really useful as you think about either just creating bots that are able to enter data into a website, or when you think about invoice processing, it's helpful to be able to see how this can work end to end. So we'll do a future video that'll show exactly how to build this full bot and how we can build this out. But for right now, this is just a demo to show kind of the possibilities of what you could be doing with invoices after you've fully extracted all of their details. Cool. So the bot is done. It's entered all 6 of those invoices. I'm going to swap back over to our slides for a quick conclusion here. So first off, IQBot auto extraction is made possible through a pre-trained invoices model and the use of that extraction package that we had loaded into that environment. So you can use that. You can run these locally on your bot runners. That allows you to much more significantly scale your IQBot processing capabilities. Customer training can be done to supplement the pre-trained model. So obviously we can create those custom groups as we need to supplement what's capable or what's possible through that pre-trained model. And just like we saw in the example that I showed, as we see invoices that go to validation, that can be my clue as to, hey, maybe I need to relook at the group that I've created or groups that I've created because I think this one should be working with one of those. Or it might mean that I need to change some of my rules that, hey, this isn't a required field or it should be. Or it may mean that I need to create a custom group and a custom training just for that particular invoice type. So for a call to action, I like to leave all of these sessions with something for you to follow up on. Number 1, head to Automation Anywhere University to learn more about IQBot. There's some excellent training there that talks about how to set up IQBot, how to set up those different groups like we talked about, how to go through that training, how to validate the groups that have been set up and make sure that they're working properly. So great resources there. I would strongly encourage everyone to check that out if you're interested in learning more about IQBot. I would also say if you're already using IQBot as an enterprise customer, make sure to try out that extraction package on your own invoices. And that allows you to do that extraction locally. It also allows you to take advantage of that pre-trained model that we talked about that will automatically extract invoice details for you. So again, this has been Automating AP Invoice Extraction with IQBot. My name is Micah Smith. Thanks so much for your time today. Be sure to check out some more of the sessions on Imagine. A lot of great content there.